Hey everyone, I'm Fred and welcome to Value First, the product-led sales podcast, a show where I interview product-led sales and growth leaders who share their secrets on how to grow revenue at SaaS companies. Today, my guest is Ross Rich. He's the founder and CEO of Accord, a customer collaboration platform built for high-growth sales teams. Before Accord, Ross was working at Stripe as one of their partnerships lead. Ross, thanks for taking the time. How are you?
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Fred.
It's great to have you. I'm excited about this conversation. I think it'll be super insightful. First thing I wanna learn more about is the journey of you building Accord, because you and your brother, who's also a co-founder, quit super high-profile jobs to work on Accord. You guys are working at Google, and you were at Stripe. So tell me more about why you started a company and went your own way.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Definitely hard to leave a company like Stripe, but originally joined in 2015 when they had a lot fewer employees. I think it was in the around 300 folks, which feels big now that I'm at Accord. It's 14 of us, but joined like relatively early Stripe. That's one of the first business sales hires, and then scaled up the team. We got to about 2,500 people, 3,000 by the time I left, and I love the startup journey and figuring things out from the very beginning. And it felt like very different problems that we were solving for at that stage. Like went through the hyper growth and was like, now we need actual systems and processes now that we're this size. Probably needed it earlier as well. But so I was looking for something that was more building things again from the ground up, and just kind of became obsessed with sales and the process and this idea of collaborative selling through my journey at Stripe. So kind of bled into it very organically. Yeah.
Amazing. And I saw that the first iteration that you guys did was on a napkin, not on a napkin, but it was a drawing.
Yes.
Uh, can you tell me more about like how it went down, how you guys started building the team, started working on the product? I'm
Totally.
curious because I think a lot of people are starting out and wondering how do you go from like 0 to 0.1, not necessarily 0 to 0.1. You guys did YC, so yeah, how was that
Yeah.
journey?
So before we somehow found Wayne Pan, our CTO and technical co-founder, it was just Ryan and myself, two ex, sales and go-to-market folks. And we used what we had. We had these connections with dozens of sales reps, managers, ops, enablement, all these people and potential buyers who we wanted to interview. But couldn't start writing code. I think it was actually a blessing in disguise because it allowed us to iterate on the idea instead of getting into exactly what the solution
Yeah.
is, but really deeply understanding the problem. So we went through a number of iterations, writing it down, lit it on a piece of paper. I remember I'd actually go through like a demo on Zoom like this, and I'd be like, okay, so imagine you click this button here, and like this is the next page. And it was super helpful because you focus less on like what exactly it looks like and more what it does. So
Yeah.
yeah, it really allowed us to hone in on what was the key problems that we wanted to solve for folks, and we're hearing, as well as like generally what would it look like instead of getting into the details of like how rounded is this button and what color is this tab. So yeah, kind of worked a while on that super scrappy kind of early startup approach before we brought on and started actually building the product. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's super insightful. It's a mistake that we did at first when we started Blinks was not honing into the problem enough and not going deep
Because you get
enough.
excited about the solution,
Yeah, you
right? You're
got
like, I'm going
you
to bring
fell
this
in love
thing to
with your
market.
solution. You want
Yeah.
to get it to market as quickly as possible. You're like,
Yep.
we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. And then looking back, I'm like, God, those were assumptions all the way through, like from top to bottom. So it's
Yeah.
good to hear that you actually went the other way and started with the problem. Speaking about the problem, what is the problem that Accord is solving, and what does the platform do or help your customers do?
Totally. Yeah. So as you mentioned in the intro, Accord is a customer-facing collaboration platform for B2B sales onboarding success, and it's basically what has been best practice that we've seen across a lot of SaaS companies, which is sharing a transparent collaborative document, whether it's on Google Sheets or Docs or presentations or Notions or pretty much any project management system or email system you can imagine. People are trying to really partner with their customers and build out these plans of what it's going to look like to work together. And we're kind of taking this idea or best practice from the top sellers, onboarding folks, et cetera, and building a software around that, which really helps CEOs, sales leaders, revenue folks build a repeatable, consistent sales and onboarding process for their company, and allows sales reps and buyers to just be more collaborative and transparent and work better together. So that's kind of the idea behind Accord.
Amazing, amazing. I think that's so relevant. And it's completely needed because the power where we are right now in SaaS is shifting to the hands of the buyer more than the seller. It's something that you've mentioned in your posts in the past that
Mm-hmm.
I've heard in your talk with Ryan New at Vendor,
Mm-hmm.
the chat that you had with him about really giving the power in the hands of the buyer. And I think that's what Accord is all about, from what I understand, is really building great experience.
Exactly.
Where do you think sales is going with the shift to power in the hands of the buyer?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I was also just posting this morning. I read an amazing study from G2 that was posting about this as well, talking about how buyers, it was like 56% of um, 20K and under sales processes, almost to like mid-market, lower mid-market, were made in a couple months now instead of long processes. So I think it's definitely shifting to like faster, more buyer-led decisions. But at the same time, I think that technology is getting more complex. You're seeing like the number of like platforms and infrastructure tools and APIs, because you can do so much more with technology now and
Yeah.
integrate everything. It's kind of at the same time, you almost need to work and partner more closely with these companies, but it's not great as sales processes today to work with them, right? Like I've had this experience many times where I've reached out to a potential partner or vendor, and I have to talk to an inbound SDR who knows nothing about the actual product or my problems, because that's not what they're trained to do. It's like hyper specialized. Then you talk to someone, you're getting qualified again, and you're like not actually learning about, it's not thought through from your perspective. And I think that needs to change because, yeah, again, buyers require working with the company even more, but they have more leverage. So a lot of people are just out there trying to, kind of fill those gaps themselves, talking to other people that might have purchased before, connections, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to see both of those forces kind of, oppose each other.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And also, like, yes, barriers to entry are getting lower in terms of building software and shipping it to the market,
Mm-hmm.
but like implementing your solution into a workflow of a company is not that
I think it's
easier
getting
than it
harder because it
was.
touches
It's
more
getting
parts of
harder.
it. Before it was siloed, right? And now it's touching
Exactly.
everyone. So you need more of this partnership. Yeah.
There's a ton of APIs, integrations. Your solution needs to embed into the workflows. Maybe if you're selling a sales solution, sales engineering, developers might need to be involved, like marketing now and growth, that we can talk about that, but no one really knows like yet growth, who owns what and who should like respond to who. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's super interesting of empowering more collaboration between sellers and buyers, where the market is going right now. What have you seen in your customers or in your experience at Stripe in terms of making that work, aside from just you know integrating with the stack in place?
Yeah, I think I honestly learned a ton from, our us trying to sell. It's been really interesting being introspective and like we're
Yeah,
trying
I
to help our
relate to
customers
that
with this
100%.
problem. But like when you're buying something or when you're selling your thing, you kind of think about, okay, what am I trying to do and how am I sharing this with everyone? So I think one of the biggest learnings, like at Stripe, I was selling a very like upper mid market enterprise type deal where like you're ripping out all of your payments infrastructure, how you collect all of your revenue and inputting Stripe. Like it's a big decision. It's very not, in a way they're doing all the research before what partners are going to talk to. Then they're spending a lot of time with you. It's not really by yourself. What I'm finding with something like your Cord or a lot of other products on the market, I'm sure with Blinks as well, a lot of people are doing their own evaluation and validation themselves. And I think thinking through what you're putting out there much more thoughtfully and what are the questions your customers are trying to answer. Like I just got off a call with our head of sales and marketing leader talking about our pricing page. Like what are the things that we're hearing in the conversations that probably should be answered there, and going back and like what more can you put out there, because people don't want to learn that from a conversation. Firstly, they don't trust, like it's not that you're talking to a bad person or salespeople are bad, like they're trying to sell you the thing, so you think they're
Yeah.
gonna try to say things in a certain way, whereas it's published, like you stand behind that much more. So thinking through what are you putting out there that is likely coming up on conversations or could, where you can kind of like frame it in a way and answer that question. That's something I think a lot about, is like more from that like product marketing position perspective that helps enable the sale, which is like very similar, I think, in the way you probably think about like product led like assisted sales.
Yeah.
How are you using the product to reinforce what the seller would say, and not just relying on a salesperson to say those things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How can you use contextual product engagement, contextual marketing engagement
Yeah,
to help the
exactly.
sellers say the right thing, engage with the right thing, engage at the right moment, and the right accounts.
Yeah.
So that's super interesting. It's something that you've posted about in the past of where that trend is going and why product led growth and marketing led or bottom up in general, because product led PLG right now is a buzz term, but a necessary one though.
Hmm.
You've talked about learning through selling, which I relate to because I feel like that's what I did from the start, is just trying to sell and then learn through the process. I'm curious because there's a lot of people here that listen to the show that are early SaaS founders that want to be bottom up, product led, marketing led, etc. How did you find your first 10 clients?
Um, Great question. It's funny. I was just talking to someone about this as well, and I think a lot of people believe that this is like it's going to come from like purely your network and everything. And I think like I mean, there's 10 people that use Try to Chord very early, but I would consider like our real customers, who
Yeah,
like
good point.
had this particular problem, and like kind of the more traditional, instead of just like close reference, was actually from our seed announcement. And I think it's a very undervalued early lever for early stage SaaS companies, or just like startups in general,
Yeah.
is using PR. And it's really interesting. Our two biggest levers and moments that we've had as a company in terms of our growth and customer base has been through that seed announcement, which we did exclusively with TechCrunch, and then our product hunt GA launch a couple months ago. And those were just huge inflection points. And again, it wasn't like, what's the outbound engine? It wasn't a content marketing strategy. It wasn't the things that you hear everyone talking about, how to get your first 10, 50 customers. It was just, telling the story, and
Yeah.
finding a platform where our users are going to be. It's going to be different for every company. Obviously, we're selling to other, high growth tech companies who are going to read those publications, but like, where do your customers hang out? What do they read? And trying to work with a platform that tells that story. Yeah, that's where our first like real 10 customers came from.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a mentor of mine who has a company that's Series B, I think. And he told me, yeah, we were trying to close really high profile clients and they wouldn't budge until we announced our Series A. And they're like, oh, well, we're open to discussion now. So I think
Yeah, it's
I
so
think
funny
that
how
can
that
be,
changes things.
yeah, that can be applied to all stages, right? You wanna showcase yourself where people are, and if your target customers are reading TechCrunch, try to be on there. I
Yeah.
think that's a great example. You have a lot of experience in sales. Your product is really well positioned to empower solutions in direct sales companies, but also in bottom up companies.
Hmm.
How are you thinking? So I went to the Accord website. You guys have a try for free, so you're going the bottom up way. Are you doing outbound in parallel, or is it 100% bottom up and then you engage sales? I'm curious to understand how you're designing your acquisition process right now.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We actually made that change a few months ago to the free trial versus request demo. Originally, we had just the classic, like, sales led motion, request demo, go through the call, hey, and really customize the process. We found that our users just wanted to jump in right away and actually, see and feel and experience the platform, but they also wanted guidance. So we're kind of doing this like, sales led motion where, hey, you want a trial experience? Let us preload it with the right, is it an onboarding and success use case? Is it you're selling a bottoms up thing, or you have a bottoms up led product, and then you're coming in and selling to a certain decision maker? Hey, let's preload the right templates and example accords in there. And this is how most of our customers buy successfully. So you kind of like frame it and then give them the workspace, and then we'll check in during their trials. So it's like a very sales assisted um, trial. It's not just like, hey, we're going to look for the product qualified like things that are happening. It's much more
Yeah.
hands-on, based on the fact that like we have to partner with our customers on helping define the framework of their sales process versus just using it as like, a piece of the puzzle. um, But yeah,
Interesting.
we found people, yeah, the leads in terms of like the free trial versus request demo, like helped with conversions a ton. And just seeing what people would do in the product when we gave it to them to start was super cool. And I think helped with us not just on the sales side, but also designing the right product, like seeing what people's first experiences are like that, even with that outframed, was super helpful. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that it's not a one size fits all too. It's not like you have signups that come in, you want to automate part of them, and then you want to find your product quality. Like everyone talks about product qualified lead right now in the PLG space, and it's like,
Hmm.
yeah, but depending on your price point, depending on your funnel, depending on the friction point of your
Hmm.
onboarding, depending on whatever it is that can get people to success, like you can engage early, you can engage everyone if you want. So I think your example is really relevant. So just so I understand well, you guys have signups that come into that people that come into your website, they sign up, and then you provide a high touch like engagement right off the bat. Like you engage with most of your users and you try to get them to success, talk about use cases, preload templates. Is
Yeah,
that
so basically click through request demo, get them or free trial, get them the workspace right away. Like that's the promise of the CTA. So we deliver on that. We get them the workspace, customized, white labeled with their logo, workspace, all that kind of stuff. And then it's like, hey, let's have a quick conversation on what you're trying to accomplish with this. Okay, we'll make sure we're giving you the right tools and way of thinking about it. And then from there, it could be, yeah, higher touch. Hey, there's other stakeholders that need to be involved, all this kind of stuff. If not, it's just like, hey, let me play around with this for a week or two
yeah.
and see if it makes sense. So, um, but yeah, getting them the thing right away and then but also having the opportunity to have an initial conversation and help where needed, I think is the right fit for us. I think, yeah, like you said it, you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of people, it's either enterprise sale or it's pure
Yeah.
self-serve. And
It's
like the
either an
right thing is
outbound campaign
probably
or
on the spectrum in there for different types of companies. Exactly.
yeah, no, absolutely. It doesn't have to be the sales rep like harassing you with calls and emails until you close, or a fully self-serve and then we never talk. But I
Yeah.
think even in the middle, it's not necessarily just find product qualified accounts and engage them. It can be
Yeah.
more high touch and more scalable. So I think that's really interesting. It's clearly not a one size fits all. I want to understand how you're thinking about going from 10 to 100. I don't know where you are right now in terms of the business, but um, I think a lot of people do non-scalable stuff at first, and then they want to build out their processes. It's something that you're also very vocal about and you have a lot of experience doing. How are you thinking about getting from 10 to 100 customers to 1,000?
Yeah. So we have what now? Around 35, 40 customers right now. I think we've done a lot of, like you mentioned, the launches and some like, not super scalable things to get there. I think that's been a really key focus of ours, going into Q4 planning and thinking about the next 3 to 6 months is like,
Yeah.
how do we have things where we can do twice as much as and see, 2x the output? Like, what are the inputs that do that? So we're looking at everything from accelerating like more partnered content. We've seen a ton of leads come from just like us talking like something like this exactly, like, similar, interested ICP and audience. Hey, where else can we help and accelerate conversations and vice versa? Makes a lot of sense. Also very aligned with like the whole philosophy behind Accord, and
Yeah.
partnerships. So that's one piece that I think is very scalable, right? Like you can help put out more high quality content. Hopefully that also leads to some SEO things. We've seen some like early hints of that. It's a longer term play, but I think that's something worth investing in early if you want to build a very efficient go to market process and lead generation channel for customers. And then looking at the classic things too is like, we got a few leads from testing out Google Ads last quarter. Like, can we refine that? Thinking about, testing out LinkedIn. A lot of our buyers hang out on LinkedIn a lot of the time. What's the paid strategy around that as well to layer on top of the organic content there. So yeah, we just brought in a marketing leader about 2 months ago. So
Okay.
helpful to also partner with someone who knows what they're doing there. But we hacked it together for the first bits, and then yeah, looking at what are those more scalable things. Hey, if we spent twice as much money on this, or we put out twice as much content, what's the output versus kind of the one-time things that you don't have much control over as a company.
Yeah. Interesting. Um, One thing that you mentioned earlier is learning from selling and learning from working with your customers at the moment. I'm
Hmm.
curious because that's something I genuinely want to know too, because we're in that process.
Hmm.
What's your process for embedding either sales feedback or customer product data back into the product? Because I'm guessing that your job as a CEO right now is one to sell, but you also do like some kind of product ownership and where the company is doing. So I'm curious just to understand like your process of switching from feedback learning into like where the business is going, where the product is going.
Yeah, I think at the very beginning, it was like, okay, we have this idea of what it is. I think a lot of customer feedback before you have something isn't helpful. Like people always, I think it's best to have people react to things. And I think we're at the point
Yeah,
now with the number of users and where we're at is like now our customers' feedback is going to be 10 times better than ours because, like you said at the very beginning, you had all these assumptions, right? You need to get something out there that people can use. It's like about filling feature gaps. And at this point, it's about really refining, right? Like, how do we make this easier with the workflows that we're seeing customers go through and really understand that? Um, and yeah, I'm shifting back to that in a lot of ways. I spent a lot of time hiring the last couple of quarters. And it's like, how do I get much closer, not just to like the decision makers at these companies, but the end users, and really understanding
yeah,
what is your workflow, what are you trying to do? The details of like, are you using even Slack with this with your customers or Gmail, and how can we embed certain notifications to make that easier? So, kind of ebbs and flows in terms of the feedback, but I think where we're at in terms of the stage of product is really, yeah, our customers are having way better ideas than I could have ever had because they're the ones using it in their workflow now. We've built it to a point where they can kind of get over that hump.
yeah,
So that's been really fun to kind of try to unleash the customer feedback to the team. But it's not just going to happen. I think a lot of people say like, oh, it's about like where are you putting it in Notion or something like that. It's like, no, you need to build the trust. You need to spend the time with the customers for them to actually invest in giving you that feedback
yeah.
because it's their time as well. So yeah.
Well, speaking about that, I think that's a good notion that we need to uncover, because you've mentioned you building the trust, but also the feedback is somewhat, it can be irrelevant until you put something in the hands of people. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like I think the mentality of if you're not embarrassed by your first product you launched too late, I think it's kind of, that was cool like 5-10 years ago, but people expect more now. So I'm
Yeah, the
curious to
bar is
get,
definitely higher. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm curious to get your thoughts there. Like you want to get a product in the hands of people to get feedback as quick as possible. You want to build trust, but at the same time, you don't want to release something shitty,
Hmm.
and people have high expectations. So how are you dealing with that?
Yeah. I think if you're building a company that's going to be successful, there's going to be enough people that are excited about even just the problem to spend time with you, that are willing to test something. Obviously, depends on the product, but like you'll find a small enough group of people that are willing to like test it
Yeah,
out in its earliest form. And I think the trick is not about going too wide to start. It's like you don't need that many people. It could be off of, 3 or 5 is better than just yourself. And I think people conflate like the idea of launching and working with customers early with like scaling your go to market. Like it could be a handful of people. That's what we did. Like we worked with a small group of people that were excited enough to like use our shitty product with the customers early on, which is also crazier because like ours is not just internally facing, it's external. And you're onto something when that's the case. And then they're
yeah,
going to have great ideas and build this thing with you. And that's actually something I think um, it's really hard to maintain because you're stretched in so many directions as a start, right? Like I mentioned, like the hiring stuff and like thinking about the early go to market things while you're building the product. And it's a tough balancing act. But I think if you're doing something in isolation, I've seen companies like even kind of tangentially in our space, like announce they raised, $20+ million, and they never, like they were in stealth for years, and they see the product that came to market with them. Like, this isn't what people are saying to us. And we would have never known what the specific segment and persona and stage of company and all these details, right? Like you said at the beginning, you have assumptions, and they're probably generally right
yeah.
if you know your space, but there's so many of them that you're making that there's no way you're going to be successful unless you're actually in market in a way, getting those data points back.
Tell me
So
about it. I have a
yeah.
competitor who raised 20 mil on without a product yet, so I can relate to that. But I think
No, I think it's a disservice to the company. You need to be growing with the market understanding, and I think it's kind of going to like one of my biggest learnings in the last couple of years doing a Cord is how much people minimize market when they talk about product market fit. And it's only a thing you can get when you're in there on the ground floor, in the
Yeah.
trenches, talking to the customers, seeing the users. You're never going to get to skip that, no matter how much of an expert in the industry or how much experience that you have.
Yeah, I think that's super great advice. And at the same time, like investors at a seed round, because you guys did a super successful seed round, they
Mhm.
don't necessarily want to see like you guys scaling like crazy. They want to see a subset of people that really love your product, can't get enough
Mhm.
of it, and really an indication of validation that you have the product to win and build that company, that go to market engine behind it. So I think that's great advice that we also made the mistake of doing in the past of trying to serve too many use cases, trying to be too wide. But at
Yes,
first
we
it's
did that
like,
as well, and it's been funny, like, because at the beginning, that's the whole idea, the vision of the company. You're going to build this amazing business.
yeah,
You're going to solve all these
huge
problems. You're going to be
market,
this.
huge
It's
opportunity.
so counterintuitive that you actually need to just nail the most narrow thing. Because I love this, it's like this quote from Jason Lemkin's Impossible to Inevitable. It's like, if you can close like the one deal, you can probably close two. If you can close two, you can close five, 10. Like if you can nail it with this subset and make them love you, there's going to be a broader subset, and the use case just outside of that you can
Yep.
nail. Trying to be everything for everyone at the beginning is tough because again, like that's how you're thinking about the startup, and it's so counterintuitive.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you want to take one thing from this discussion, is start really niche, really narrow, and understand like where you want to start and then grow from there. Don't try to go too wide.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to mention, so going switching directions completely, because I think we need to talk about it, because um you are strong about meditation, well-being. I saw one of your posts about the startup happiness curve from YC, and it made me laugh because I couldn't relate to an image more than that one. And we'll add the link in the description. But I just wanted to ask you, like founder to founder, I think that's an important part to bring forward, of like founder mental health,
Hmm.
well-being, meditation. So I just wanted like a quick shout out to what you do to make sure that you're wealthy, you're healthy, and that you're you're really cruising along the tough journey that is building a startup.
Yeah, great question. So important. And I think, yeah, we focus on a lot of stuff we just talked about, the exciting company building stuff. And like, it's a marathon. You need to do all this stuff for a while to like really nail it. Doesn't happen overnight. And it wears you down, right? Like, you're so intense, you're passionate about this thing. The highs are very high at the beginning, the lows are very low at the beginning. I definitely haven't figured it all out, but I think over the years, even before starting a Cord, I had a pretty good, like, I'm a very routine person. Which helps me a ton. So, the morning routine, like get up, I try to practice yoga at least 20, 30 minutes every morning. And it's like so easy just to like roll out of bed, check the phone, all these things, but like building in things that make it easy for you to do that. Like,
Yeah.
after a certain point, after, whatever, 9, 10, whatever time you go to sleep, like turning off your phone, putting it outside, the little thing, because then when you get up, it makes it easier to do the things because it's not right there and go down that rabbit hole. And it was like, oh, what about the alarm? The best thing that ever happened to me is buying an analog alarm clock, because then I set the thing, I put it outside. Most times, obviously, it's tough to follow even your own rules, but that was a game changer for me. Yeah, it's tough as someone that like had a lot of these practices and like very into mindfulness and self care. I struggle with it, so I can't imagine. And I don't like typically even like before a core, I didn't get like stressed easily. So I'm like, I can't imagine for people that are like not on that far side of the spectrum. So
Yeah.
it's something that I don't think gets spoken a lot about. It's you hear about the funding rounds and all these exciting things, but not the hard work and kind of sacrifices that go into it. So I think every time I take a couple of days off, I'm like 100 times more impactful. I'm about to take off next week. And I know when I come back, I'm gonna like have amazing ideas. I'm gonna like reset. I'm gonna be so much more effective. And
Yeah.
it's funny because like it's the thing that's more enjoyable. It's the thing that's best for everyone, but it's so hard to do to let
So hard to
go.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
I
I'm
work
excited.
my
I'm getting so stressed about it, but I'm like, I know it's the right thing.
Yeah, no, I relate to that 100%. Like I used to feel bad when I was taking days off. but realized at some point, I found a mentor of mine who has a later stage company. He's like, I take Wednesdays off to ski because that just makes my ability to be a leader. And it's just it's an exaggeration example, but
Yeah.
I think your advice is really good of the little things. Like a good example of that too is my cell phone. My alarm is in my kitchen. It's not in my bedroom, and it's far away so that it's unsynced to my bed routine. I think those are the little things. It doesn't, you don't have to be Jack Dorsey, like meditating in a cold bath like for 2 hours every morning. Like the just shutting down your notifications when you finish work, whatever that
Yeah.
time is. So I think that's great
Totally.
advice. All right, man. I think we have to wrap up. You're a very busy person. I'm gonna leave you alone. But before I do, I'm gonna shoot 4 quick fire questions. You ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. What have I not asked you that you think I should ask?
What have you not asked me that I think you should ask? I don't know, the biggest mistake that I've made.
Big. I got that 3 times already. Biggest mistake that you made
Really?
in your
Oh
career.
man, there's a few of them. Biggest mistake that I made. Honestly, probably trying to move too fast at the very beginning, like some of the stuff that we talked about. I think
Yep.
things just take time, and I think the what is out there in the world is not a reflection of what it actually takes, and it's a lot of thoughtful learning, and it's not the pace. And yeah, that's one thing for me.
That would be my answer too. Second question: which CEO or founding team do you look up to and why?
Um, It's an easy one for me. Stripe, John and Patrick
Right.
Collison. After seeing them build Stripe, it's like amazing culture, product, company, everything. So yeah, definitely
One of
them.
the most successful startups of all time. So
And
great.
just
Great
nice
answer.
people too. It's like I don't know how you do both, but yeah.
Amazing. What's the most underrated tool, growth technique, or skill for sales in your opinion?
Um, I don't know, it's the most effective, but probably most underrated again is the PR piece and just like how very early on to kind of get those data points in a very efficient way. So yeah, doing some PR.
Cool. Love it. Something you wish you knew when you're 20.
Oh my god, a lot of things I wish I knew when I was 20. A lot of funny things coming to mind. That's I don't know. So originally I had my dream job, which I got after school, which is at Columbia Records in the music industry. I wish I knew that then that wasn't the path I was going to go down. It was
Good one.
yeah,
Good one.
yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, cool. That was super insightful. That was a great chat. I really enjoyed it personally and learned a lot from being an early stage founder too. And I hope our listeners will do too. If people want to get more information about Accord, they can go to inaccord.com. And what's the best way to reach you?
Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to have a conversation with other early stage founders. It's just Ross Rich. Find me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Cool, man. Thanks, Ross. Have a good one.
Of course. You too, man.
See you.